It's time once again to come to the defense of medieval knights. Now the video today is an old one from the channel Factsverse. When I say old, I mean 3 years old, so I fully expect someone to come to the comments and say, "Raven, why are you replying to old videos? Aren't there better things to reply to?" Firstly, no there are not. I'm low on response video content right now. Secondly, misinformation has no age requirement. Lies and slander should be acknowledged and pointed out regardless of time it's spent festering. And thirdly, that's dodging the issue. The issue here is that we once again have a channel slandering the historical knights for seemingly no reason. But what makes this video rather unique is that they emphasize how these are facts about the knights that are terrifying. Yes, I know Simon Whistler did something similar in his Top 10s video. But here, this guy restates the word fact a few times as if to drive home that these are unquestionable facts and should be treated as such. But unlike Simon, this guy left no sources in his description, so we can't even fact check him on these. But enough preamble. Let's see what these terrifying facts we never knew about knights are. Here we go.
Factsverse presents Terrifying Facts About Medieval Knights. There are many things that we associate the knights of the Middle Ages with. Thanks to film and television, we see these men as being noble, honorable, and chivalrous. These are the things that the entertainment industry wants you to see. There are actually some terrifying things about medieval knights that you probably don't know about. Sir William Wallace.
Whoa. Stop. What's that? What is that? That's a number 2, isn't it? Okay, scroll back. That's a number 1. Wait. I thought this was your introduction. Wait, this is your first terrifying fact? That the entertainment media gives us a noble and honorable portrayal of knights, and there are things about them we probably don't know about? Dude, that's your introduction. That's not a point. Okay, sure, I guess that's something, but there are a few problems with this. Firstly, the Hollywood media, as well as the media in general, has presented knights in both positive but also negative lights before. In fact, in recent years, knights of medieval Europe have been treated as wicked, dirty, and or uncivilized. President Obama, as well as various other political and social leaders, have demonized the Crusades and the knights who fought in them.
Remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ.
And literally, I've responded to at least 3 videos from people arguing about either the wickedness or incompetence of knights. So to say that we're all blinded by the media about knights isn't entirely accurate. In fact, the current state seems to be rather contrarian. Secondly, you say you probably don't know about. Objection, Your Honor, assumes facts not in evidence. You don't know what we're aware of or what we've been taught, and saying probably proves that much. Your audience could very well be aware of these facts of yours and might have more knowledge on them than you do. Anyway, rant over. You were talking about William Wallace?
Scottish knight Sir William Wallace fought in the Battle of Stirling Bridge.
Did you say battle or bottle?
Fought in the Battle of Stirling Bridge.
I think you said bottle.
During this fight, he had a strange and brutal way of showing off his victory. According to the legend…
What did you just say?
According to the legend…
No, I didn't hear you say that. Repeat that.
According to the legend…
I'm going to pretend for just a moment that I've gone completely insane and what you just said was just garbage and gobbledygook. I now have my sanity back. My ears are fully open. Please say that again.
According to the legend…
Okay, so I did hear that right the first 2 times. Okay. So Factverse is teaching us about a fact about knights. They're teaching us a fact about knights by citing a legend. Do I actually need to explain the problem with that?
Wallace approached the Hugh de Cressingham, and he was the treasurer of the English administration in Scotland in the 1920s.
The what?
And he was the treasurer of the English administration in Scotland in the 1920s.
Again, I have gone completely insane, and I didn't hear you correctly. One more time?
And he was the treasurer of the English administration in Scotland in the 1920s.
Oh, okay, so the 1920s! The 1920s, yes, yes, that's when he was around. You mean 1297, right? Hugh de Cressingham was the English treasurer of Scotland from 1296 to 1297. You can't even get dates right. Look, I could have kind of understood if you screwed up like maybe a decade or so, but the 1920s? Seriously?
Wallace flayed him, and his skin was cut into small pieces as tokens of triumph. It was a brutal and sadistic thing to do. The Lettercost Chronicle wrote that Wallace also made a sword belt out of Cressingham's skin. It also reported that he took a broad strip from de Cressingham's head to his heel. He used that to make a baldric for his sword.
All right, so this whole second point, in summary, you're espouting a legend to be a fact, you're unable to even get a basic historic date accurate, and you're only talking about one knight, William Wallace. Okay, a couple things. Firstly, the whole flaying him thing. That's more of a Scottish thing than a knight thing, first of all. Secondly, even if the story is true, that's just one knight. It does not speak to knights as a whole. And besides, if we're going to bring up barbarism during the Scottish War for Independence in the late 13th century, would you like to know how William Wallace was executed? Yeah, let's not go into that. Either way, this point lacks relevance as it does not speak towards knights in general. It's based on a legend which lacks credibility, and you seem so inept at this that you actually missed the date of events by literally 7 centuries. Dang. Look, I know that I was hard on Simon Whistler, but wow.
They didn't defend all of the weak. Knights are known for defending the weak, and that is true, however, they did not defend all of the weak. Women and children were defended, however, peasants were not. There have been plenty of stories that the knights treated the peasants horribly.
Such as? Are you going to give an example? Maybe some citation, maybe a few names or a few events, something, or are you just going to throw that out there and hope it sticks?
Due to the stress of battle, some of the knights took it out violently on the local population. This means that plenty of peasants were raped and murdered.
All right, hypothetical here. You are a business owner, and you decide that you're going to beat the hell out of your employees, all of them, because you've had a bad day. They can't work now, and when they get back from the hospital, they go on strike. They want nothing to do with you. How will you make money? How will you run your business? Now, a knight does not own a business, but he owns the land, and the serfs and peasants work that land. If he hurts his serfs and peasants and they revolt, die, or become bitter with him and stop working, who suffers? I mean, the peasants still have their crops and resources. The knight makes nothing off of it. He can't kill them. He needs them. A knight who kills his peasants and serfs is a fool. And yes, there are some foolish knights in history, but to say that this is a general practice of knights, that is not a fact.
Raping nuns. In 1379, Sir John Arundel needed to wait for the right time to continue with his naval expedition. He and his men went to a nunnery where they resided. Unfortunately, they did not offer the nuns gratitude for their hospitality. According to Thomas Walsingham, Sir Arundel and his men didn't care that they were in a place of sanctity. They violently assaulted and raped the nuns. This went on until the group was ready to go back out. This is by far one of the most terrifying facts about medieval knights. These nuns offered the knights sanctuary, and they were brutalized in return.
I like how you say, this is one of the most terrifying facts about medieval knights. No, this is a terrifying fact about John Arundel. Again, you're taking the actions of one knight and accusing all knights of wickedness. This has little relevance. As a wise man will tell you, do not judge the whole by the actions of the individual. But more than this, I tried looking up this incident and I found next to nothing. I'm familiar with Thomas Walsingham, who is a chronicler of Richard II and Henry IV, but I found no mention of John Arundel in his work. But assuming this story is true, let's assume that it's there and I missed it and it's all a true story. Okay, what does it have to do with knights in general? This is supposed to be a terrifying facts about knights, not this one guy.
A strange style. During the 15th and 16th centuries, a codpiece was a common piece of clothing. It's a triangle piece of cloth that covers a man's genitals. Over time, that piece of cloth became more decorative for style purposes. As the codpieces evolved, they became part of a knight's suit of armor. Rather than covering the man's genitals, the piece became a mold that looks extremely obscene. The knight's genitals fit perfectly into that mold. Some knights had larger molds than others. This is something that would be considered extremely inappropriate nowadays.
You know what, I'm actually going to replay the footage you just watched in the background, and I want you to notice something very fascinating. In all of the images he showed, did you see one codpiece? One inappropriate genital part? One penis? No, you didn't. You didn't see any of that. That's because there are many different armor variations throughout history, and not all of them had those pieces. The fact that this idiot couldn't even do the diligence to find one of these images and show his audience as evidence is a testament to his ineptitude. But now I shall do the horrible task of showing you an image or two. There, this is what he's talking about. Now, as to the history of it, around the 15th to 16th century, civilians during the Renaissance began to find it more austere to show off their codpieces rather than hide their genitalia. The idea being that the bigger the codpiece, the larger the genitalia must be behind it. Obviously, this was in an attempt to emphasize manhood and sex appeal. Knight armor of the 16th century was more worn for ceremonial purposes than for actual use. So as a result, the fashion and design of armor began to reflect the fashion expectations of civilians, and thus this emphasizing of the codpiece became commonplace in the armor as well. But now with that said, this is not an issue with knights. This is a reflection of the change in fashion values in the 16th century. And furthermore, considering I can't walk into a public school bathroom without seeing someone having scrawled penises on the bathroom stalls, is this really the worst you can say about the knights?
Spectator Sports. During the Middle Ages in the 13th century, knights took part in battles that were considered to be spectator sports. Over time, the battles became more regulated. However, it wasn't always like this. Before the sanctions were put into place, the battles often had brutal outcomes. The competitions were extremely violent and gruesome. In some cases, the competitions were worse than the actual battles. It was not uncommon for a knight to die in front of a crowd of thousands just for sport and entertainment. When it became obvious that things were getting too brutal and the sanctions were put into place, the battles were no longer fought to the death.
Okay, he's not entirely wrong here, not entirely. It's like the gladiator fights in Rome. The goal is not to fight to the death. I don't know why you said that at the end there, saying it was no longer about fighting to the death. It was never about fighting to the death. That was never the goal, but sometimes, unfortunately, death resulted. It's kind of like in a boxing match. If a guy takes a too serious blow to the head and later dies from complications, the goal was not to kill. Sometimes accidents happen. Sometimes things happen that we can't control. What these tournaments were fights for the amusement of crowds, to win glory and honor for your name, and to possibly win some kind of prize. But you just said the new rules and regulations that were put into place were effective in keeping death from happening. And you're right. Tournaments now had safety guidelines, and it was a clear sign that the contestants, fans, and nobles holding the games were not seeking blood or death. So to avoid those things, they made sure to make precautionary measures. Tell me, if you did a top terrifying facts about architecture, will you say that in the past people died a whole lot due to construction hazards, but now we have regulations and equipment to prevent it, and still treat that like it's some kind of terrifying fact? I think that this is a good thing, that the knights of medieval Europe actually looked at each other and said, you know what, maybe in these tournaments we should try to avoid accidentally killing each other. Let's put some rules in place. Let's make sure that there's some safety guidelines. That shows that they're not all bloodthirsty killers, isn't it? That seems good to me. I really think you're stretching. Let's keep going.
The Code of Chivalry. Knights were known for being chivalrous. There was even a code of chivalry that the knights were expected to follow. Unfortunately, many of the knights didn't follow this code. After the battle, many of the knights would steal goods that were not allowed under the Code of Chivalry. Some of the knights stole for practical reasons, while others stole simply for profit. For the knights, the Code of Chivalry was nothing but a bunch of words. There were, however, many knights who did take the Code of Chivalry seriously. These knights believed in what the code stood for, and they would never have done anything to break that code.
Why are you making this video? Why do you keep contradicting yourself? Knights thought the Code of Chivalry was just pretty words, literally next two sentences. Some knights did adhere to the Code of Chivalry. They would never hurt anyone. Dude, you've got to be kidding me here. So first, what code are you talking about? Chivalry is not a singular definitive concept. Its definition changes depending on the location, culture, and lord. To some, chivalry is defending the weak. To some, chivalry is glory in battle. To some, chivalry is loyalty in the face of great struggle. Chivalry, as it was known to the Romantic knight, had various definitions depending on these factors. Originally, chivalry, or chevalerie, was a term that referred to what the knight was trained to do: fight on horseback. Its definition changed over time, so you don't seem to understand that concept here. Secondly, yes, some knights did steal in wartime. It's called looting, and it was done by warriors of every nation and culture because supply lines can only get your army so far during a war. Looting had little to do with chivalry codes, as it was an understood practice of war. You could sum up this whole video thusly. Knights were bad and evil. Except when they weren't. Then they were super good and righteous, and that's a fact. Ugh.
Being a knight was expensive. To be a knight, the man was required to purchase a horse, weaponry, and an elaborate suit of armor. During the mid-13th century, knights would spend around 32 Anglo-Saxon pounds. That was a great deal of money. To make it a bit more understandable, for an archer in those times, it would take 10 years of wages to earn that amount of money. Because of this, many knights came from wealthy families. Those who didn't have to save for years and years in order to save the money needed to buy the necessary equipment.
Okay, not necessarily. Bear in mind, how does a knight earn their living? They are given a plot of land and serfs to work that land. The land's value is dictated by the crop output, livestock output, and produce that the land provides. This is then taken in taxes by the knight or lord. The knight who has a very prosperous and well-cared-for fief may become wealthy very quickly, hence why you don't piss off your serfs. They make you damula. And bear in mind, what feudal lord or king would make someone a knight and then this happens? Welcome to my knights of yore. We ride for war next week. Will you join us? Of course, sire. I merely need to get arms and armor and horse. Can you afford it? I don't think so. Well, good luck then. See you out there. But, sire, how can I fight for you if I don't have weapons or armor or horse? That's for you to figure out, numbnuts. And speaking of which, get a better codpiece. That one's a bit droopy. Knights didn't need the finest of armor and weapons and horse either. They could go with a helmet and chest piece or mail. In fact, look at the earliest knights. Most were limited to what armor they had. Knights were trained in sword, shield, horseback riding, the spear, and of course, they would have to have some of what they needed to fulfill their role. What do you think they trained with? Some knights had to earn the respect of the king. In fact, one thing that I find funny, you mentioned that a lot of knights that were made knights came from noble families so they could afford all this stuff. But then you mentioned that those who did not come from noble families often had to pay out of the pocket to get what they needed. And while that may be true, what do you think they did to earn the respect of their king or noble lord that would allow them to become knights in the first place? Probably they did something exceptional in battle, which would imply they already have some degree of weapon or armor or skill. We're just running around in circles. Let's keep going.
Suits of armor were not easily accessible. It was very difficult for a knight to put his suit of armor on and then to take it off. Over time, it did get easier. However, knights still needed help when dressing and undressing. When a knight was in battle, the adrenaline rush would often take away their need to go to the bathroom. However, considering all of the infections going around at the time and the lack of knowledge regarding hand washing and disinfecting, digestive issues were a continual problem.
Look, I know you're lazy, but is that really the best you could do? Boba Fett and Jango Fett cosplayers for a night video. Who edits your stuff? Fire them. If you edit your own stuff, I feel sorry for you. And as for the hand washing thing, you are aware the medieval world knew about washing hands, right? In fact, it was a common before dinner practice.
It's very likely that knights having accidents in their suits of armor was a common occurrence.
Did medieval knights soil themselves in their armor? Firstly, Knight Errant did a video where he was able to put on and take off a full suit of armor. He put on the armor in about 9 minutes with assistance and got it off in about 3 minutes. But aside from that, they of course had ways to use the bathroom. Many plate mail armors were skirted so that they could simply relieve themselves by adjusting the skirt. They also had armor flaps in some variants. Keep in mind, these guys are riding horses. Putting metal under your dangly bits on a bouncing horse is a one-way ticket to agony. Your children will come out all wonky. They had to take measures to ensure that they were comforted and loose underneath.
Subscribe for more.
No, I will not. So you only had 9 points, 2 of which were about a specific knight, not knights in total, and most about either armor inadequacy and a lack of moral grounding. Except most of these you left context out, contradicted yourself numerous times, and even cited legends and stories as facts. You know, I may have been hard on Top 10's video, but at the very least he cited sources. Granted, you didn't read those sources well, which one could argue is a greater sin, but you clearly don't know what you're talking about. I almost feel embarrassed responding to this video because I feel like I'm kicking a toddler. It's like when you're asking a bunch of grade schoolers calculus level questions and then getting mad when they don't figure out the answers for themselves. It's the same thing here. This person doesn't seem like he did enough research or enough time or put enough effort into this video. I mean, heck, he threw in a Jango and Boba Fett image to represent knights. Seriously? And he got the date so demonstrably wrong about William Wallace's beef with Hugh, he actually was off by 7 centuries. This was a terrible video. And yes, I'm well aware that it is an old video. I'm well aware that it's 3 years old. I get that. But this video is silly. This video is very, very silly, and I felt after viewing it that I needed to respond to it. It was sent to me by a fan on Discord, and so I said, all right, let's take a look. I hope you guys enjoyed the video all the same. If you did, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and a comment down below. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.